My name's Manny Francis. I'm a director of customer success here at Blueshift. And again, today we're talking about your Martech stack and a continuous improvement approach. Today's conversation will cover, not exclusively, but will contain elements of some of these topics. The set it and forget it approach, which is now largely a fallacy in the Martech landscape. We'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about how to evaluate your tech and maybe help you decide when you know you need to buy and when you might not to, and why a continuous improvement approach is more important than ever in today's changing Martech landscape environment. Again, I'm Manny Francis with Blueshift. We'll talk a little bit more about Blueshift today, but a lot more about marketing technology. And to that end, joined by Shamir Duverseau from Smart Panda Labs. Got a lot of experience and knowledge in this area, and I'll let Shamir introduce himself.
Thanks, Manny. As you mentioned, Shamir Duverseau, I'm Managing Director here with Smart Panda Labs. We're a digital consulting agency, help organizations who are very much in the earlier stages of digital adoption, figure out how they can strategize, build, and then optimize those digital experience tactics that are so important today. And excited to talk about how marketing technology plays an important role in that.
I said super, and we're lucky to have you, and I'll stay away from the mute button as much as possible for the next at least 30 minutes. We got a lot to talk about. So as most of us are aware, attending this webinar, Blueshift is a maker of a Smart Hub CDP, the Smart Hub CDP, which is a platform that connects customer data from across your organization, enhances it with marketer-friendly AI, and allows you to orchestrate omni-channel campaigns from a single platform. But we're not here to just talk about Blueshift. Usually Martech webinars are about, buy now, or this amazing new solution is going to solve all your problems. But we know that there's no silver bullet, and we know that the buying process takes some time in Martech, especially if you want to get it right. So Shamir, can you start by telling us what makes you so passionate about, solving this very challenging problem that marketers are facing today?
Certainly. There's the old saying that change is the world's only constant. And just taking in the sample of the last 18 months, the change that we've seen has been off the charts. So there's that need to constantly change what we're doing as marketers to adapt to what's happening in the market, to what competitors are doing, to how people are changing and how their demographics and psychographics are constantly shifting. Yet we often get stuck in this thought process that, okay, once I set this up and build this and get this going, that's it. It's hands off and I'm good to go. And it's going to run itself magically. And that obviously cannot happen. It has to shift with how everything else is shifting around it. So it really gets us at Smart Panda Labs very excited about the fact that, hey, how do we set this up? How do we create these processes to allow these things to shift and adjust based on all these forces that are constantly shifting around them?
Cool. So change is the constant. We've got to accept that. And I think as marketers and technologists, we sort of understand that. But at the same time, I don't think that we want to be tinkering or changing, all the time. So what do you think is the right balance of, building a foundation of technology that you can iterate upon so that you can get the best of today's solutions, but also make sure that you're not always tinkering?
Yeah, it's definitely about saying, okay, what's the right foundation and what's the right framework here? And how does that framework allow for the possibility of change within that framework? So the tactics are constantly to change, right? The activation, the activities that you're engaging in with your consumers, with your existing customers, prospects, what have you. But that doesn't mean technology needs to change that often. It just means the technology needs to be set up. It needs to be established in such a way that it allows you to make those changes on a very consistent basis. It allows you to shift and adjust and adapt. And if you have the right technology set up in the right way, that's what it's going to do. It's going to empower you to be able to make those kinds of changes.
So what you're saying is, as the market conditions change and maybe certain channels of marketing communications are more favorable to an audience, that a foundational approach will allow you to pivot rather quickly into those new avenues that we like to reach as marketers.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, ultimately, the kind of the best place to be, the kind of the Shangri-La that we're looking for is that culture of experimentation. It's the constant learning, it's the constant change mentality. But as you alluded to earlier, you cannot be changing your technology that often. You can't have a culture of experimentation when it comes to technology. That's cost prohibitive, it's time prohibitive, it's resource prohibitive. That's just not going to work. So quite the contrary, you need to say, if we're going to have this culture, what is the technology foundation, the infrastructure that's going to allow us to be able to empower and accelerate that culture?
Fantastic. And so a light bulb has come on in my head with an idea, which also reminded me that I have a light here that I could turn on that I should have prior to. So maybe we can see my face a little bit better now. And I can also share the light bulb that was, in my mind. And that is, kind of this thought process of two thoughts. There are many, many different types of tools out there. Some of them could be considered, mandatory, right? A plumber needs a monkey wrench, for example, but many other tools. And so if we could talk about like the foundational parts of a tech stack, and preferably maybe the ones that you might not want to change so much. And then for those of you in the audience, we're going to play a little game. It's called Acronym Bingo, which is a fun way to introduce a poll. So I think Shamir is going to tell us a little bit about foundational elements of the Martech stack, and you might look in your chat after he's done to see some poll questions.
Cool. Yeah, so I think the easiest way to think about it is kind of a circle, right? So you start with data. From data, you drive to insights. Insights drive actions. Actions yield more data, and then you start that cycle over again. So if you think about that, you're thinking about a technology stack that allows you to do each of those things. So you need to be able to gather and put together data about your customers. You need to be able to derive insights from that data. You need to be able to use that data to take action. And then you need to be able to experiment on that data and then gather additional information so that you can start that cycle over again and use it to gather additional insights and continuously kind of revolve around that. So if you have the right technology stack in order to accomplish those key components, then you're starting in the right place.
Fantastic. So we started with, I believe, customer data, right? And so, ultimately, customer data in the marketing space historically has been somewhat separate, right? And you talked about this circular approach, a flywheel, we often call it. And I think that that's reactive to where, data used to live, which was separate from the ability to act upon it. So if you can talk about maybe, that aspect of it, we've got a poll out there of this was the gimme. So we like to start out with the gimme, and I like to see we've got some good positive responses so far. So from a CRM standpoint, that's kind of where we used to talk about customers, but we've shifted to a different acronym of late. Can you talk about that side of customer data and what it means today?
Sure. So as you mentioned, CRMs are still obviously very important. For many companies, they're the source of truth, the source of record for that customer information. But as we mentioned, you need to be able to move throughout that entire flywheel, right? You need to move through that cycle. And because of the nature of the world that we live in today, it's got to be real time or very near real time to be able to move from data to insight to action and back to data again and continuously turn that flywheel. And in a sense, thinking about a wheel, you want to go as fast as possible. You want to pick up speed and pick up momentum. So now all of a sudden you need systems that talk to each other in real time and that allow you to move immediately from data to insight and then to action and then to be able to measure what's happening. So you take a customer relationship management tool like a CRM. Oftentimes that needs to talk to another tool that we're going to talk about, a CDP. That way the CDP is able to put together all that data and then ultimately push it out for activation to other systems. So now you're gathering the data, you're deriving insight from the data by being able to stitch it together, and then you're immediately able to activate it to push it out so that you can say, okay, we're going to trigger this SMS message based on this information, or we're going to trigger this email communication, or we're going to trigger this retargeting ad, or this module on the website, whatever the case may be, based on that data, again, happening near real time based on reactions of what's coming into the system, and then immediately getting pushed out.
Absolutely. I think that that's a great description. And, we threw in another acronym there that we didn't put in our poll, CDP, a customer data platform. We expected, our audience to understand that one, as Blueshift is a certified CDP. But it's great that we had over 50% participation and 100% response rate, or correct answers on the customer relationship management as, a piece of historical technology in the marketer stack. And you mentioned CDP. Do you feel like CDP is a foundational element, a must-have for modern marketers?
I really do. And there's lots of different forms that CDPs can take. There's the Smart Hub CDP that, of course, Blueshift offers. There's more kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, traditional CDP models that are out there. But in some form or fashion, data is coming into your organization from multiple points, right? So the CRM is one, there's point of sale systems, there's different points of interaction. The data is coming in from multiple places. There needs to be some way to stitch all that together because that's the customer expectation, right? They expect that you're going to have an understanding of their level of interaction. And we know we all expect it because we've all had that frustration where, we get a call or perhaps we make a call in about some product or service we have, and they're asking us questions. And it's like, well, you sold it to me. Don't you know the answer? Why do you need me to tell you, what I bought or what I own or how many years my warranty is or whatever the case is? Customers expect that if they're talking to one company, it's one place where all the data is. You're going to put all that data together, and then you're going to be able to deal with me and give me the kind of experience I expect. So a CDP is an integral piece. It's a powerful way to do that, to be able to stitch that together and get that 360 holistic view of the customer.
Fantastic. I'm super glad you mentioned that holistic view of the customer, because, we feel that that 360 view, that holistic view is really what's giving the power back to the marketers so that they can understand really I'm laughing at one of the poll answers. I love it. So I put out there, what is a map or a MAP? And we got some good answers coming back so far. It might be the thing that you connect to your CDP, so that holistic view of the customers that you have, that you've now harnessed for the marketers right there in front of them. They're able to action upon it. And, we feel that that's kind of how the flywheel should work, right? That holistic view of the customer, those activities around the customer, and those updates like you talked about, preferably in real time. So as we think about this sort of real-time nature and like all of these channels that we may be connected to with our map, and I'm chuckling, we'll go ahead and publish the results now and share them. Our audience did know that we were talking about a marketing automation platform by and large, and some of us remember using a map prior to GPS days. So that's good as well. Talk to me about those expectations about real-time capabilities and how necessary it might be to action upon your clients' engagement.
Yeah, again, it goes back to the expectations of the modern day consumer. You go online and you make an e-commerce purchase. Think about how much patience do you have for when you get that confirmation email? Not very much. I mean, you expect it to come pretty instantaneously. If it takes longer than a few minutes, you might begin to think something's wrong. Like, did my purchase go through? Did my credit card get rejected? Was there an error on the website? For better or for worse, we're an instant gratification society. So we expect things to happen immediately based on the actions that we take. And when that, again, to use that same example, when that doesn't happen, we begin to question things. Doubt enters in. Something's wrong. Something's broken. There was an error. I made a mistake. The company made a mistake. And that's what you don't want associated with your brand. You don't want doubt. You don't want error. You don't want negativity associated with your brand, because now the perception of your brand is going to be carried there with that particular person, and that perception will continue to spread. So you've got to be able to meet them in real time in a real way. And again, connecting the data to the activation becomes that critical component, so that immediately when an action happens, whether that's in the call center or on the website or in the mobile app, that immediately is activated in action, and you immediately get that SMS message, or you get that email, or the website changes and personalizes, wherever the case may be, based on that action, because ultimately it's a confirmation to you. Even when it's not a formal confirmation message, it's a confirmation to you, to the consumer, of, okay, they got it. Like this worked. This happened the way it's supposed to. And now you feel good. Now you're relaxed. Some friction has been reduced from the experience.
It's a great explanation, and really good, sometimes we think of like the fear factor in marketing, right? Like what could go wrong, and a really good, explanation of the customer's activities, that necessitate or at least benefit from a real-time or near real-time environment. Want to open up to the audience that we are taking questions. I see at least a couple of them starting to come in, and we'll address those questions here in a couple minutes. We're a little bit past the halfway point. You had mentioned, Shamir, that we want to be constantly evaluating. We don't want to tinker too much, but we want to make sure that we know what our stack can do for us and what we want it to do for us. So I have kind of two questions. For a marketer that is operating today, right? Like they're sending out their emails, they have some form of analysis and reporting and attribution. I was hoping, it's a two-part question. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the right way to get started with the analysis. Like, how do I divide my, greatest resource, which is time, and take it away from the marketing activities that I'm doing today, so that I could start to analyze the stack. What's the right way to get started? And then also in that process, maybe as to sort of further the thought process for somebody that's new to this, are there some pieces to the stack, some tools that are either falling out of favor, or maybe the functionality of those tools has been absorbed by some other tools, and now it's more common? So how do we get started? And then what are some areas that we should look at if we think we have some fat that we can cut out of our stack?
No, both good questions. I think the way I like to think about this is, you think about buying a house. And you think about making that kind of investment in time. And when you think about your house, typically you're trying to think about what's going to fit the needs of my family, of myself and my family. So do you have multiple kids? Do you have one kid? Do you have no kids? How old are the kids? How long are they going to be in the house? How long do we plan to be in this area, right? All these different things are factoring in. And then based on that, you say, okay, well, this is the kind of house we're looking for, and this is the part of town we want to live in, and so forth. So it's the same thing with technology. Jim Collins is, he's always talks about technology as an accelerator of momentum, not the creator of it. Mm-hmm. So technology is a tool. It's a means to an end. It is not that end. The end is what you're trying to accomplish as a marketer. It's the tactics that you're putting out in the marketplace and the results you want to see from the tactics. So if you think about it in that sense, then really what's really driving your evaluation of technology is your evaluation of your marketing planning and your tactics. Once you get those in place, or however often you evaluate those, whether that be yearly or quarterly or whatever the cadence is, well, you're therefore forced to ask yourself at that point, does the technology I have, is it enabling me to do what I now feel like I need to execute from a marketing standpoint? And that's your evaluation point. And if those things match up, then you're fine. I'm simplifying it, obviously, but your evaluation is fundamentally over. It's like, great, it can allow me to do what I want to do. It can allow me to do what I'm thinking about doing and where my roadmap is taking me from a marketing planning standpoint. But if you're finding that you're hitting bumps along the road, that it's not quite meeting up, those things aren't fitting together, well, now you know that friction, that's causing you to take a step back and say, okay, is this the right tool for me today? Is this going to be the right tool for me tomorrow? What do I need to change? How do I need to relook at this? And a lot of that has to do with obviously having the right tools in place, which for the most part, most of us have kind of those key tools in place that we feel like we need to use from a data standpoint. So a CRM, from an activation standpoint, a marketing automation platform, or an email platform, whatever the case may be. But what often happens is maybe the tools don't allow us to do the kind of marketing we want to do. They don't allow for the testing, experimentation we want to do. They don't allow for the personalization that we want to do, or segmentation, or whatever the case may be. And we're fortunate because any modern tool should have a pretty well drawn out product roadmap, and saying, this is what the capabilities are today, and this is where we want to take the capabilities. So you kind of alluded to what's kind of the yellow light to kind of say, hey, there might be a problem here. Well, if the product that you're using lacks a roadmap, if they don't know where they're trying to take the tool or where they're trying to go, well, that's a problem, because as a marketer, you need to move in a certain direction. And if the tool doesn't even know what direction it's moving in, then how can it possibly align? So I think it really comes down to saying, what are my tactics as a marketer? What's my marketing plan? What's my roadmap for that? And how does the tool and its roadmap align or misalign with that roadmap? And that's really going to point you in the right direction in terms of, are we set here? Are we good to go? Or do we need to take a pause and reevaluate what we're doing?
Yeah, that was a great sort of summary of how to analyze the stack. And I think one of the things that came out of that's interesting, I've not quite heard it described in that way. And, we talk about vendors, we talk about tools or products, and we talk about partners. And when you think about, what you said, so powerful that the product roadmap or the roadmap of the vendor or partner that you're working with, even so much to say as like their vision, right? Their market vision is important when you're analyzing tools, because as we've accepted, the change is the constant. That's what we expect. We expect the marketing landscape to be different 12 months from now than it is today. And with that in mind, are the partners that you're working with, the tools that you're engaging in, also on that evolution, right? Are they going to be different a year from now? And so, that's a really interesting thought process. And, back to Blueshift a little bit, we're not always a smart hub CDP, right? And that's part of the evolution of what do marketers need? What is the market demanding? And some of this synthesis of features and robust integration is really what the market is demanding, and, has necessitated the growth and the evolution. So thought that was really, right on point. And so we did publish another poll here, and some of you had the sense that we would ask this question, and most of you had the sense to answer the question correctly, that an ESP is your email service provider. And, we talked also about sort of the siloed approach, and how back in the day, an audience might be separated from an ESP, but today, that siloed approach is very much different. It's that integrated approach, and the ESP is integrated in the marketing automation platform, which should be very integrated with your CDP and giving you that flywheel. So I thought, maybe that would be a good opportunity to talk a little bit about channels and channel execution, because that's an area that is very hard to future-proof, so to say, but an area that we know there will be change. Can you tell me about sort of channels in general and channel management within the stack?
Yeah, so we kind of alluded to the fact that you have that experience where you call and again you have that don't you know this about me? Well, the same thing again. The consumer looks at you as one company. They don't care how many different divisions you have and departments and tools, and the fact that those tools don't talk to each other, like that's irrelevant to them. They're completely ignorant to that the overwhelming majority of the time. Yeah. So they expect that if you are sending them an SMS message, that message is saying the same thing as the email communication is, and it's saying the same thing that the website is, and it's saying the same thing that the app is. So you've got all these channels, but they've all got to be aligned. The communication along those channels, the information, the content, all has to be in sync and aligned. And that can certainly happen with multiple tools. It can happen with using a Smart Hub CDP, where that activation all comes from one central point. But whatever the case is, they've got to be in sync. They've got to be aligned. They've got to be saying the same thing. And oftentimes we pass on the issues technologically or organizationally or both that we have in our companies. We pass those on to the consumer, and we make some odd assumption that they should get that they should understand, when really the exact opposite is true. And the ones that do it best do it by hiding any of their issues and kind of back of the house problems from the consumer. It may be a mess back there, back of the house, but they find a way to hide that from the consumer because that they understand that's what the expectation is. But of course, the more work you have to do to hide your problems, the higher the time, the higher the resources, the higher cost, right? So if you can create a technology foundation that actually allows that to happen in real time, in a real way, it's fully integrated. Well, now you're not really having to hide anything. That's the kind of experience you're delivering end to end, and you're doing it with less time commitment, with fewer resources and without a lower cost.
Great description. And I think, yeah, marketing departments do not want to be in the housekeeping business, right? And so we should keep the house as orderly as possible. I'll remind folks again that we're open for question and answer time. We're coming to the bottom of the half hour here, and I did just, get a great question. And that is, when we're talking about, the house, what does it look like? Do we need to clean it up? Who's in charge of these activities, right? The question directly from an attendee is, who should be involved in assessing your current Martech stack? Is it IT? Is it the marketing department? Should your vendors be involved? Is it an agency necessary, or when is it beneficial? I think that's a burning question. And I'll backtrack a little bit. There used to be this conversation of like, who owns Martech? Is it marketing? Is it the CMO, or is it operations? And then became marketing operations and MOPS, and it could still be IT. So in this instance, who do we include? Who do we need to include, and who's beneficial in the process?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to be different with every organization, but in the room always needs to be the business side. So that's marketing, or that's product, or whoever's kind of running the business or responsible for those business results. And it needs to be IT. And those two groups on a large scale, those two groups of people need to be in sync. They need to be aligned, right? Because ultimately the organization, the business is trying to accomplish something, and marketing is tasked with these tactics and activities to accomplish it. And IT is tasked with saying, well, here are the tools you need to accomplish it. And again, you can't separate those two things. They've got to be in sync. You've got these tactics, and you need the tools that allow you to deliver on those tactics in order to get to where the organization wants to go. So when you think about it in that way, there needs to be complete and consistent alignment between marketing and IT. Now, the other question you kind of raised was, well, do you need to get a third party involved, perhaps an agency or another partner? It depends on what you have internally. I know we find a lot of times when we get involved, a lot of our time and energy is actually spent getting kind of marketing and IT at the same table and kind of saying, okay, let's get together and have a conversation. And it's not to say that they don't get along. Some organizations, they don't get along, but that's not always the case. But a lot of times it's really more about kind of translating. It's really kind of being a translator. It's kind of saying, oh, okay, let's take what marketing wants and translate that and put that into a way that IT understands. And the challenges that IT now has, okay, let's translate that and help marketing understand what the challenges they have and how they're vocalizing those challenges. And once you're able to translate and you're able to have a productive conversation, well, now it's like, okay, now we're on the same page, and now we can actually move forward and accomplish something. So that's usually where we see the friction and the challenges. Not that those two departments can't get along necessarily, but they're not necessarily speaking the same language, and the messages aren't getting across. And because of that, just like if you're in a room with a stranger and you don't speak their language, it's going to be hard to move forward. You can't move that conversation forward until you clearly understand each other.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think this will probably be our last poll we put out there. What does DXO stand for? And we're talking about digital experience optimization, but what you talked about really is digital experience kind of definition, right? What is the experience that you want your clients to have, largely digitally, right? And how do we technically, that's the IT department, deliver that? And so I think, that's really the foundation of what we're talking about today. I think, we're at the bottom of the hour, and I think I was told that if we can speak productively for 30 minutes, that's a big win. I feel like we could go on a lot longer than that. We do have to be respectful of people's day and whatnot. Give you another minute or two here. If you have a question, please go ahead and type it into the Q&A area or the chat for everybody to see. One question that we had, considered is, are there any sort of telltale signs that it's time to remove or more likely replace a piece of technology in the tech stack? Is that coming back to the roadmap that it's not able to grow? Are there other sort of, red flags there, maybe around integrations or complexity of integrating with some of your preferred tools? But what can you say about how to decide that a tool or technology is no longer for you?
I would say, I'm going to try to boil this down to the simplest way I can think to kind of express it. When you start hearing people, whether it's your vendor or maybe perhaps your IT department, when you start hearing people say, yeah, we can't do that. When you start hearing that, then there's a problem. Because what's likely happened is that you've experienced something in the marketplace. You've had an experience. You went somewhere and you bought something. You had an interaction with a brand, whatever, and you got a push notification, or you got an SMS, or you got this cool email, or you had this experience on the website, and then you bring it back back to your internal team and your vendor or whatever the case is, and say, oh, this was great. I'd love to be able to do this and that. And yeah, we can't do that. Like when you start hearing that, that's the sign that there's a problem. It's fine to say, actually that's going to be part of our next release. Okay, great. You can deal with that. Yeah, we can do that. We just have to make a couple of configuration changes. Okay, we can work with that. But a lot of people are hearing of late, yeah, we can't do that. And when you start hearing we can't do that, that's a problem, because that means that someone isn't keeping up with the marketplace, and they're not attempting to keep up with the marketplace. And in modern business, you can't afford that. You just can't. You can't tolerate that.
Yeah, that's a clear and obvious one. Yeah, we always, try to think about how, right? And if the answer today is no, the answer tomorrow should be maybe. And is this, good for you? Is it the right move? So yeah, I appreciate that. If you hear no, that's likely not the way to go. So we're about to wrap. I did want to squeeze in one more question before we ask how we can get in touch with you and learn more about Smart Panda Labs. That'll be the last question. I was wondering, I know that you work with a lot of different clients, and we talk a lot about different customers or users of marketing technology, maybe anywhere on a very wide spectrum of the marketing evolution curve. I'm wondering if you could pull, one or two examples, snapshot of the folks that you're working with, and maybe explain in a little bit more detail, like a problem that they were encountering, and how you solved it by adjusting the tech stack. I think that'll be a good way to kind of bring this to reality. And then I know that we'll be very, very happy to hear how we can get in touch with you as well.
Yeah. So we work with a few clients where a lot of the issue is obviously they have a digital presence, but the actual sale takes place offline. So they have to actually get in touch with someone and have some interaction where they're taking place offline. Real estate is a good example of that as an industry, where the transaction a lot of times is actually taking place offline. And what we found is there's a complete wall between what happens online and what happens offline. And again, that wall is purely, technological or organizational. It is not the expectation of the consumer. The consumer is assuming there is no wall. I'm interacting with you as an organization, as a brand. So where we found technology to be helpful, in particular, in this case, the CDP use case to be helpful, is for it to be that hub, right? That line of communication between what's happening online and then ultimately what happens offline. And especially because usually that offline sales cycle takes time as well, especially if the larger the sale, typically the longer the sales cycle. So now a person has certain milestones they're hitting as they go through that offline sales cycle. Well, you'd like that to be reflected online. You'd like communications to go out to help nurture the person, to help educate the person, to give them the content that they need. So we have found CDP, and especially Smart Hub CDPs like Blueshift, to be very helpful in solving that problem and in keeping that connection point between what's happening offline, but then helping to display that and reflect that in a digital experience online, so that the person is constantly getting caught in that omnichannel experience that's helping to drive them through to conversion.
Great example. Yeah, offline interactions are a great example of siloed communications, events, real estate closings, things like that. Yeah, we think any sort of siloed activity would benefit from that Smart Hub CDP approach. Even if it's a digital experience, you can pull it into that holistic view. So fantastic, Shamir. It was great talking with you today. Like I said, we could probably do this for quite a bit more time, but you and I and everybody in the attendee room has a busy day. So I'll thank everybody again for joining. Really happy that you're here. And Shamir, Smart Panda Labs seems like it's got a lot of good things going on. I think we probably have some interest out there. How do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, please feel free to reach out to the website, smartpandalabs.com, or Google us at Smart Panda Labs, or just feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can, from the email or wherever you signed up, you can get my name, and I guarantee you there will not be another Shamir Duverseau on LinkedIn. I will very likely be the only one. So you're pretty sure that if you reach out to me, you get connected to me. So you should be good.
Fantastic. Looking forward to that. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. You know how to find us, blueshift.com. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shamir. Bye, everyone.